Joe, welcome to the program. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Glenn.
You bet. It's great to have you. I mean, you used to work for the Epic Times, and you guys I think you tear it up over there. I think really some good reporting over there. And you also co-wrote and appeared in 3 January 6th related documentaries. And you told the real story there. And you also wrote for the Wisconsin State Journal and the Chicago Tribune. So it's nice to have you on board at the Blaze. Let me ask you, Joe, what do you find creepy or suspicious about this guy that nobody's paying attention to, that just tried to kill a bunch of people and did kill some in along with the No Kings movement?
Well, the more we learn about him, the less this entire thing makes sense. I mean, he has a very unusual backstory. He's worked a lot in the food industry, companies like Del Monte and Gerber, in production, safety, supervising, the plants and keeping everything clean and safe. And he's probably moved around the country at least a dozen times in the past 20 years with his jobs. But he also has a background as a preacher, which we're just finding out a little bit more about that. I have a story out this morning about that he has traveled around the world, at least in part, as a preacher, a Christian preacher who had studied at an institute there in Dallas. And he's been to Africa. He's talked about going to the Middle East, and he in the West Bank and Gaza, and talked about going there to be basically a missionary to radical Islamists, and to tell them, as he put it on one of his websites, that violence isn't the answer. Now, that's an interesting thing for him to say. I talked to Robert Spencer from Jihad Watch, and he said if he actually did that, he's fortunate to be alive, because typically if you proselytize, that's a death sentence in Islam. So,
yeah.
He said if he actually did that, he would have been killed or taken hostage unless they saw him, as he put it, unless they saw him as a fool and they just cut him a break and left him alone. So but he's also preached in the Democratic Republic of the Congo several times in an evangelical Christian church there. And we came across some very interesting video of him talking about his story of his awakening to Christianity. But he was so excited about talking about Christ, he put his arms out almost like a bird and was flying around the stage saying, what Jesus has done for me, and whoo-hoo. It's not what you'd expect.
Okay, I mean, so we have the Del Monte guy going around, then preaching around the world, and preaching the opposite things he seemed to have. Did he become mentally ill? And then, before we get to that question, when did he become involved in politics with Tim Walz and everything else?
Well, he was appointed to a governor's workforce development council, first by Governor Mark Dayton, who was a Democrat, and then Tim Walz. Of course, we all know Tim Walz. He appointed him to a similar group, and he spent about 9 years on these boards. These are advisory councils that typically...
Was this when he was a preacher, or when he was with, Del Monte?
Well, actually, some of this stuff overlapped, and it was all going on at the same time. And
okay.
And he's got other ventures that were going on. This guy is really a puzzle, but he did get appointed to these 2 commissions by Democratic governors. And, so we've looked around to try to find out if there is, aside from that, if there are any indicators that this was a political man. We know he was pro-life. He was opposed to abortion. He spoke about that, but we did not find any indication of political donations, either federally, state, or local, that he gave donations to any political party or candidate. The newspaper in Oklahoma City claims that he was a registered Republican when he lived in Muldrow, Oklahoma, but the voting system folks out there say they don't keep records back that far anymore. So and the article did not state where they got the information. They didn't link to any proof of it. So that seems fairly soft. So we just don't have a lot to go on outside of this wild backstory with all these different jobs. He ostensibly ran a security company called Praetorian Guard Security Services, and he had several vehicles that were kitted out as squad cars, basically. You'd see these in different cities, Pinkertons and other security companies.
Yeah.
So he had several of those, and he undoubtedly where he got his equipment that he was wearing the night that he committed these shootings, and he was dressed up as a police officer. But
creepy mask. Okay, so hang on. I'm confused. So we don't know if this guy had a political agenda one way or another he seemed to attack the Democrat that was the one that was bucking the extreme, left of her party. Is there any rhyme or reason or pattern on the people that were on his kill list?
Well, that's one of the only tells that we have, is that he kept both in the vehicle that he was driving that night and in a room that he rented for his job. They found notebooks, handwritten notebooks, and in his car there was what the FBI concluded was a hit list, and there were more than 50 names on it. And as far as I can tell, I haven't finished checking every single one of them, but that these were all Democrats, not just Minnesota politicians, but also in Iowa, Illinois, and Wisconsin. And he had lists of Planned Parenthood locations and officials in Minnesota on this list. And of course, the list did include Alyssa Hortman, the former House Speaker, who was assassinated along with her husband and the family dog. So that list was very lopsided, and we know.
But we don't know. Do we know if any of those Democrats have anything in common? Are they hard left? Are they maybe mealy-mouthed? People that are. I don't know. I mean, she seemed to be somebody who was bucking the system that the Democrats would want. So it's not like this was a hardcore lefty. This seems like somebody who actually had a conscience, was trying to do something that they really believed in. So why was she on the list, or can you tell, have you looked at the politicians' names to be able to see any pattern on voting patterns or anything?
Well, in her case, and this got almost no attention in the corporate press, within the past 2 weeks before her death, there was a key vote in the legislature in Minnesota that would strip the subsidized health care for adult illegal aliens. And that was a very close vote, and it turns out she was the deciding vote and the only one to cross party lines to put that legislation over the top. And so that certainly didn't endear her to the left, because that's a kind of a sacred cow. And so come January 1st next year, adult illegal aliens will no longer have access to the subsidized or free health care. So that was a big vote, and that's something you certainly have to put into the equation here and see if that provides any sort of motive. But he really didn't have any visible interest in state politics that we can see. So, there's
so bizarre.
There's lots of intrigue, but he hasn't made statements to people that so and so. I just can't stand this person, or or on the other side, whether he was his childhood friend claimed that he was a Trump voter, but we don't have any. Minnesota's an open primary state, so there's no records that we could check on that. It's just a lot of soft information, and I have a feeling that when this is all said and done, his story and the explanation is going to go a lot deeper.
Okay. Hold on just a second, because I've got a couple of questions. Why did Tim Walz, know this was a political assassination immediately? The phone now has been traced to several foreign countries. Is that because of the preaching thing? His wife arrested with several passports, and I don't understand any of this. Okay, so when this happened, we're talking about the Minnesota shooting. When this happened, Tim Walz comes out, seemingly almost immediately, at least that's the way it felt, and said, this is a political assassination. Was this just speculation or wishful thinking? What is it? How did he know that?
That's a great question, and nobody asked him that, to say, hey, what leads you to the conclusion that this was a politically connected assassination? It clearly was targeted. He selected his victims or potential victims for that night, but you would think that you would have some intel and nothing that was ever shared to say, this is why. We know this is why. In fact, the FBI and the local police will not ascribe a motive, even after looking at all of his notebooks, which they haven't released all the pages of them, but they did release the hit list. But I found that to be very telling that he would describe it in that manner, and I think that set off some of the back and forth between the right and the left on the finger pointing on this.
Right, and then the police knew somehow to go to the second location in advance of the shootings. How did they do that?
Well, these communities are all fairly close together, and after Senator Hoffman was shot and his wife was shot at about 2 a.m. on the 14th, that word was circulated to all the area departments, and several of them did proactive policing and sent squads out to check on some of their lawmakers. And in one case...
But they didn't stop him, did they, at the second location?
No. The second location, the family had changed their plans, and they were gone, so they were not even home. It was the third location where this fella was parked in his fake squad car about a block away from a state senator's home, and the local New Hope Police Department squad pulled up next to him and tried to get his attention. Of course, he's got this creepy-looking milky white mask over his head, and he just stared straight ahead. And the officer apparently was satisfied by the look of the vehicle that, this must be an officer from some jurisdiction here watching out for the house. So that officer continued on to the state senator's home and waited for some backup. And by the time other squads arrived, he was gone. He took off, and he went to the Hortman home where he murdered the former speaker, her husband, and the family dog. So he certainly could have been stopped if there had been maybe a little more inquisitiveness, shining the flashlight in there or knocking the window saying, hey, but they didn't do that. And then
I've only got 2 minutes left. So you pick which one it has more information in it. The phone being traced to so many foreign countries, or his wife being stopped with cash and passports and everything else in her car. Do either of those make a difference to this story?
Well, I think there is an explanation for the wife. He had texted, he did a group text to all of his family, his children and his wife, in which he said, Dad went to war last night. And he said he didn't want to tell them much about that because he didn't want to implicate them in anything that he was doing. And then he texted his wife, he called or texted his wife separately and said there's going to be police coming to the house and they're going to be trigger happy and I don't want you to be there. So he advised her to take the kids. But she had $10,000 in cash. She had passports and she had the kids with her. Well, of course, the police were tracking her phone, and they pulled her over, I think it was about 80 miles away, and she volunteered to let them look through her phone, to look at the texts, but they found the weapon and the ammunition in the vehicle as well. So, again, these things just make you pause.
I know. Joe, thank you so much. Really great to have you writing for The Blaze. We'll continue to talk to you about this and follow this story because it is absolutely bizarre. Appreciate it. Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Yep.
You bet.